Hello and welcome to the fourth dev video for Starship Simulator. It's been about 6 months since our last video, but we've certainly not been idle in that time. We've got basic multiplayer added to the game, a working NPC crew, some dynamic object interaction, and a live electrical system which is powering the lights and other systems on the ship. And it's the electrical system I'd like to take a look at today. We'll look at where the electric is being generated and how it's being distributed throughout the ship to its various systems. So if we start by taking a look at the deck plan here, you can see that we're on F deck, which is the upper engineering level. And around the outside of F deck we have a series of battery rooms, and this is where the electrical energy is stored that's being produced by the reactor. So the reactor in the center here sends power out to the battery rooms, and then the power is taken from the batteries back into the reactor room, where it's then further distributed around the ship. So if we go and have a look at that now, just around here. So this is the main reactor room. You can see one of the NPCs there going about their business. And it's important to note with the NPCs, they're not just there for flavour, they actually do have a role and a position on the ship. So they have their own crew quarters, and they have their own tasks to complete during their shift, which they just kind of busy themselves with at the moment. And they're based on the epic metahumans, and they're using the default metahuman clothing at the moment, but we'll be replacing that with a proper uniform and proper animations soon. So this is the main reactor. It's still missing some coolant and some fuel feeds and a few ancillary systems, but it's coming along quite nicely. This was the old control panel, or the distribution bus for the reactor, and this is being replaced with a proper reactor control panel, where you'll be able to manage the startup and the shutdown of the reactor, along with power distribution and some other bits and pieces. And if we just come down the stairs to the lower level, this is where all the primary power distribution takes place. So I'll go through these devices in a moment, but if we have a look at the reactor itself, this is an Neutronic fusion reactor, so it uses deuterium and helium-3 as its reactants. And the reason I've gone with that is because being Neutronic, it doesn't produce any harmful neutron radiation, so it's a much cleaner reaction. It takes more heat and energy to achieve fusion, but we're 200 years in the future, and in the game's lore we figured that out. So it's a clean fusion, and it uses direct harvesting to convert the fusion reaction into electrical energy, and that's what the top and the bottom pieces will be for, the diverters. And you can see they're still lacking a lot of connections here. So this is the liquid nitrogen feed going into the reactor, which gets piped through the magnetic coils there, and it comes back out to be recondensed back into a liquid form. And then on the other side we've got the fuel that's going in, the deuterium and the helium-3, and that'll be the same in various other points all over the reactor. This is still a Pathfinder at the moment, but the power will come out the bottom. This will be converted into 2 separate feeds, so that we've got some redundancy. So you can disable one feed whilst working on the other, and that all goes into the main reactor bus, which is now here. So that the screen is a work in progress, as you can see, it's all over the place. But you've got 8 cables coming out the side here, so that's 1 high voltage cable for each of the each of the battery rooms, sorry. And on the other side, we'll have the reactor loopback connection at the top there, which will feed into a reactor main switch over this side. And the reason that's needed is because as much as the fusion reactor is creating power, it also needs power in order to manage the fusion reaction. So that'll be looping around continuously. And also with the reactor main switch we'll have ground or shore power connections, so that if you're in space dock, for example, you can plug in some external power to the ship. And in addition to that, it will also have some startup capacitors which will be under the floor here. So on the occasion where the reactor shuts down, you'll be able to use those capacitors to restart the reactor. So let's say, for example, you're in combat and you want to boost the shields, you could push the reactor as hard as it will go, but in doing so you will overheat the magnetic coils and then the fusion reaction will fail, and then you'll have to cool the reactor down and then start it up again from scratch. But all the controls and the ancillary systems to support that is something we'll be adding next, and then I'll be doing a video on the cold start procedure and how that works. But for now, if we take a look at how the reactor distributes its power. So as I said, first of all it goes into this main distribution bus, and everything on the ship will eventually connect to this in some way or another. So on the other spare ports here you'll have things like the shield generators, the weaponry, and the FTL drive, which will be drawing power directly from the reactor main bus itself, whereas everything else on the ship will be battery powered via these cables. So if we follow a couple of them now, and to do that we need to go out into the corridor beyond. So here's a couple under the floor that are coming out of that reactor main bus, and again you can see either side here, those are the same cables. And if we follow them up here, you can see that they're connected into one of the first of the distribution boxes. The UI screens are designed to mirror the actual circuit layout itself. So you've got the main high voltage cable coming in, and that's being split into lower voltage distribution cables. And so there's one of those for each of the battery arrays. So this represents a single battery room, as does this one on this side, and there are more around the maintenance tunnels as you go around. So each of these individual cables goes through the wall into the battery arrays beyond. And we'll come back here shortly, but for now I just wanted to point out where that power goes. So if we go into the battery rooms themselves, it's a bit of a trek. Obviously, with a normal operation with the ship, you'd have a whole crew dealing with this, not just one random guy running around on their own. So you can see we are here, we were just outside the boundary here on the other side of that wall. This is where the stairs goes up and down. And then over here we have one of the 8 battery rooms. The other ones are just round there. And here you can see the battery units themselves, which again, like a lot of things here, are currently a work in progress. So there will be individual solid-state battery arrays in there, and you can see that each one is now fully charged from the reactor. And that's one of those 6 cables coming in, and there's another one that goes back out. So if we go back down again, past a crew member going about their business. And we'll make use of those in a moment as well. So what we're going to look at now is these connections coming in from the batteries. We'll just see where they come from. So this time we're looking at the upper cables. So if we just follow those to where they come from, they go around here. So on this side we've got the cables going into the batteries, and now we're on the other side with the cables coming out of the batteries, and they feed into these aggregators. So whereas the other one was going in, these are coming out. So you've got one feed for each of the 6 battery arrays, and they all get aggregated into a single feed, which is this high voltage cable here. And you can see there we've got the draw on the batteries, the voltage and the amperage. So we follow this big cable at the top. Back down here again. These stairs, by the way, are going to be rebuilt, so that's just a placeholder. I haven't quite decided on the wall panels yet for this section. because we're technically still in engineering, I don't want it to be comfortable like the rest of the ship. It needs to have that kind of hard-worn engineering feel about it. So those two cables we were looking at, that's these ones here, and these come into the main distribution frame per quadrant on the ship. So you can see here you've got the 2 battery feeds, there's 1 for each room, and that gets load balanced, so that will eventually be able to load balance between one room or the other. So you could have, say, 50-50 by default, or you could choose to use one room more than the other, just to save the other one as a backup. But that's down to the player as to how they choose to use the power coming out of the battery rooms. And then you can see we've got it going to each individual deck, and here we're working with the starboard supply, so that's G deck starboard, F deck starboard, and so on. And then you actually have the individual breakout as well on each deck, so 1 cable for each deck in the starboard quadrant, which goes up, and you'll have one of these sub-distribution boxes on every single deck. So this would be, for example, here the corridor lighting, and then you'll have the rooms and any other hardware that requires power on that deck. And if we go up here, just to demonstrate how this is actually a live feed, so right now you can see the lights are on, and if I just disconnect that box, you'll see that the lights have now lost power, and the box itself is now showing an alarm because it's expecting there to be a draw on this connection and there's no load. And then we can confirm that that's a genuine fault by holding down the test button, and the no load light comes back on, so we know it's a genuine issue. If we disconnect that breaker, then the warning light goes off because it's no longer expecting there to be voltage. And then of course if we turn them both back on, the lights will come back on. And beyond this, the cabling, well, just like the lights themselves, now has a full damage model as well. So if we kind of damage those cables, so you're now seeing that the box is showing a fault light, and it's not a case of being either broken or fixed. It's actually a sliding scale, so it's percentage based. So as the cable becomes more damaged, the faults occur more frequently until it reaches a point where it's just a dead cable, and then there's no power going across it at all. So right now we've just got an intermittent fault. But one of the engineers will now have picked that up as a job that needs to be performed. So whilst there's nothing that needs fixing, they will just go about their business, checking things and just doing routine tasks. But as soon as there's actually a fault that needs to be resolved, they will drop what they're doing and make that their next job. So just need to wait for one to turn up. Again, because they're a real crew doing real tasks, they don't just appear from nowhere, they actually have to kind of put down their tools and make their way to the location of the fault. But where are they? Is the question. Oh, there we go. So she's going to repair that now. So you can see for the debug text, she's walking to a repair point of interest. So that's just a really bad animation at the moment. None of the animations are final. And she's now fixed that. So, see, it's fixed. And the lights are now on again. And that's the same for any of these cables or boxes. And also, for example, on here, just to demonstrate the load balancing, if I disconnect one of the battery rooms, everything keeps on ticking. But you'll see that the load has doubled, and if I turn that back on again, the load will then drop because it's being balanced 50-50. If I disconnect both of those, then obviously there is now no power going to that, and if we go out here, we'll see that we're in darkness because the power is out, and then any one of those will restore power, just like that. So in terms of engineering gameplay, as the ship goes through its normal life, exploring and getting into scuffles with aliens maybe, the ship will constantly be taking wear and tear and will also be suffering from combat damage. And rather than just having a set shield percentage and hull percentage like you would in the typical game, the damage is going to be location based on the ship. So there will be certain damage spheres when the ship takes an impact, and if that sphere overlaps any cables or hardware, they will then take an amount of damage depending on the size of that impact. So you'll find that when you're in combat or facing a dangerous circumstance, where the ship is hit will very much determine the amount of damage you take. So you could, for example, lose a particular deck or a particular quadrant of the ship, and that really makes it very dynamic when you're taking damage. So that's pretty much it for the electrical side. Obviously, right now it's just the lighting that's running on live power. In fact, if we look up there, you can see that there's cabling to all of the light panels powering them. But that will of course be extended to every system on the ship. So no matter what it is, it will have live power feeding it, and that will all go back to the battery banks or the reactor directly. So the other thing I just wanted to demonstrate is the lights have been built so that they now support lighting scenarios. So at the moment, of course, we're just on condition normal, but then we could go to, say, yellow alert or red alert, or drop to emergency lighting. I think the reactor looks particularly cool in emergency lighting, glowing away. But this enables us to have any kind of lighting scenario we want, so all the lights on the ship are completely dynamic. So for example, as a proof of concept, we can go into disco mode, and fair warning if you're sensitive to flashing lights, because it does get a bit crazy. This probably won't be in the final game, this is just a test, just to demonstrate the capabilities of the system. It does get a bit crazy. Or we could simulate, say, an alien virus, which might look something like this. So then if you're playing as a science role, then it might be your job to clear that alien virus out of the ship's computer and then bring us back to condition normal again. So there's a lot of flexibility in the system, and we can tweak and tune that depending on the mood or what happens to be going on at the time. So I think that's about it for now. If you're interested in staying up to date on what's happening with the game, please do like and subscribe and hit the bell. We do hope to release videos more frequently than we have been doing. Obviously 6 months is a crazy long time between videos. And I'd just like to say a huge thank you to all of our Patreon supporters, without whom this just wouldn't be possible. And it's also worth pointing out that this game will be going out for free on Steam, so you know, without those Patreon supporters helping fund the development of the game, this just wouldn't be possible. So yeah, huge thanks to them, and there'll be a list of all our supporters in the description, and also a link to Patreon as well. So if you want to support the product and support the project rather, please do get involved, and it will help bring this out quicker and make it more of a fleshed out game. So thanks for watching, and hopefully there will be a new video very soon, and that should hopefully be in multiplayer as well, so we should have a bit of a group game going on. Thanks again, and catch you next time.